as these parts are coming through, this is changing my belief system. This is changing the way I see the world. This is changing the way I even see myself. This is changing my feeling states. It's biologically shifting things inside of my entire system, almost even on a neurological level. And it has the ability to also bring me back to memories that are connected to these parts at the same time. So if I let that inner child part completely possess my system, and I give it permission to, as I'm the central observer of the process, then I'm actually revisiting that time frame in my life when I actually suppressed this part of myself. And for me, this was generally around the age of when I was 14 years old and my parents ended up separating. What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Universal Mastery. Welcome back to my public YouTube channel. All right. In today's video, I have a very significant subject that I'm going to be speaking about that I think is very, very necessary to understand, to really understand what is going on inside of your psyche and how to better navigate the different parts of yourself. Okay, this is probably going to be one of the most valuable videos that I actually ever recorded and released to my channel in general. And what it is that we're going to be speaking about is fragmentation within the psyche that then creates different parts inside of your system. And we're also going to be discussing a little bit of the connection between that and what is known as the dark night of the soul. And one of the most unique things that I'm going to actually do in today's video is I'm going to, in myself, show you these different parts of my own psyche as I allow myself to be completely possessed by them, so that you as the viewer can have a better understanding of what these different parts look like within the self, coming from me as an example. And then I'm going to also be showing you a little bit of the difference of these parts within the system, how the fragmentation gets created, and then what is the true self? What is the authentic self that is in the center of all of these different parts? Okay, this is literally going to be an extremely valuable video. So if this is something that you take interest in and you want to know a little bit more about, then you simply have one thing to do, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is to stay tuned. I will see you on the other side. Before we get started, let me give you a little bit of an introduction of who I am, just so that you know who you're getting this information from. My name is JeremiahJSchwartz. I am a professional occultist. I am fully initiated in the entirety of the Kabbalistic tree. I'm studied when it comes to the 22 major arcana of the tarot deck. I'm studied when it comes to planetary energies in association with astrology. And I'm also very aware of trauma and its relationship to the nervous system. Okay, let's go ahead and get right into the beginning stages of this subject today. So we're talking about largely the different parts that exist within the psyche, which every single one of you listening has. There is not one of you that is void from this process. Everyone has parts inside of their consciousness. Everyone has experienced some degree of fragmentation from past traumas. Okay, this is like the starting point where we have to look at to understand. Okay, now with that being said, how does this fragmentation occur? Okay, so generally what happens is we go through some sort of trauma in the past, depending on whatever type of trauma it might be. Could be like complex trauma, where it's something that was, consistently and gradually traumatic that took place over a period of time, generally like a longer period of time. Could have been a shock trauma. Could have been something that happened, very quickly. Could have been like a physical trauma. There's different types of these traumas that exist. Not getting an emotional need met in a certain situation. And whatever type of trauma it was, that is what matters. Okay, so the point is that there was a trauma that took place. Now, from that trauma, what happens with our psyches is typically what we will do is we will separate ourselves into two different parts. So this is where the fragmentation occurs. So there will be one part of us that is more vulnerable. Usually it's connected to more of the feminine energy, and it typically is going to be connected to like a younger self, like a younger child self. That part fragments into one area of the psyche, whereas another part fragments almost in the opposite direction as a protector of this more vulnerable part. So this protector part typically is going to be more so of a masculine type of energy, and its role is to protect you as the central self from the trauma itself, to help you survive it. And the way that it's doing that protection is by protecting that vulnerable part of yourself by not having to feel the negative emotion that was created from the trauma itself. Okay, so what that basically means is that this protector energy is trying to generally keep us from feeling whatever the emotion truly was from the original trauma itself, because that's its way of protecting. This is fragmentation. We all go through this experience, and we can have many different parts inside of our systems. So typically we have a true self, then we have a protector part, and then we have a vulnerable part. Masculine, feminine is usually how the dynamic's going to go between the parts. And, you know, with that being said, that's not by any means the limit to the amount of parts that someone can have. So someone could have hundreds of parts inside of their psyche that maybe they're aware of or maybe they're unaware of, that all have different memories and different emotions that they are connected to, different traumas that they could be connected to. Okay, but so that's mainly what I'm trying to explain, is that you can have as little as like 3 parts: central self, protector, vulnerable, and then you could have as many as like 10 protectors, 10 vulnerable parts that are all operating in different ways. Okay? So with that being said, that's important to understand. There is a difference, there is a contrast between these parts. Okay, as I said, one's a little bit more masculine, one's a little bit more feminine, one's more vulnerable, one's a little bit more protective. Okay? The reality of the world that we're living in our today's time, most people are over-identified with their masculine protector parts. Okay? Literally what that means is that they are possessed by that fragment within their psyches, because they are thinking that they are not safe. So they are perceiving everything around them as a threat. To some extent, they are being driven and overran by this inner protector energy, which once again sees everything, whether it's consciously or unconsciously, as a threat to the self. Remember, as a threat to that vulnerable part. So as an example, you might go through a trauma at the age of 5, and let's say you were a little kid, you're playing outside, maybe you're about to go touch some poison ivy, and then your parent runs out and says, "Stop, don't touch that, that's bad, do not do that." That little experience there, although on the surface it may not seem that significant, and you can, generally see how the intention of the parent was good, not wanting their kid to, hurt themselves by touching poison ivy. But the way that 5-year-old child can interpret that as if, oh my gosh, I did something wrong. My parents don't love me anymore. I can never do that again. I can never be playful like that again. I can never be curious again. I can never be adventurous again. So that example is enough for the psyche to actually start fragmenting itself, where that part of that 5-year-old child that was just exploring and wanted to touch this plant that was poison ivy actually shells itself off, and then the fragmentation occurs, where now a protector part of this child starts to take center stage, and this more vulnerable, more adventurous, curious side of this child is actually starting the process of being suppressed. And whatever those negative emotions are that are behind that situation, so remember, the parent comes out, says what they say, that kid may very well interpret that as, oh my gosh, my parents don't love me when I act like this. My parents, yelled at me and disapproved of me and made me feel like I'm bad, made me feel like I'm worthless, or made me feel like I'm not going to be able to survive because of whatever the situation is. So yeah, so that is enough for that for that little child at 5 years old to actually have to fragment the psyche and suppress these underneath emotions, these more negatively charged emotions within their system to survive it, and start the process of over-identifying with that protector part of themselves, slowly and surely, so that that never happens again. So the protector part is like, we're never going to do that again. We're never going to be curious again. We're never going to touch that poison ivy again. We're never going to be that adventurous little 5-year-old again, because that almost got us disapproved of. That almost got us to a point where we weren't loved by our family. So we're just not going to do that anymore. We're gonna be stronger. We're gonna be smarter. We're gonna be more calculated, more logical, right? This is the state that most human beings are currently being run by, in our current times in society today. Okay? Take a moment to actually let that soak in, because that is pretty significant to actually become aware of. All right. Give me 1 second. Okay. So now you have a little bit of a better understanding of how this fragmentation is actually taking place. And that's a very important place to start with, understanding these different processes that are actually in this moment taking place in your own psychology, in your own psyche. So, what typically happens is, we get older and we don't even know that these parts are existing inside of us. We don't even know that there's such thing as fragmentation. And what this literally means is we have multiple different personalities inside of our bodies, inside of our psyches, that come through at different times. And a lot of them, once again, are absolutely created from different traumas we went through and how we had to fragment. Which means with one group of people, we may act one way. With another group of people, we may act another way, because there might be something, in the energetic dynamic of these different relationships that we have that activate this different part of ourself that comes from some sort of memory from the past. So, this can get nuanced too. I could eat a certain type of food and there may be a part of me that remembers this food from the past, because maybe I used to eat that food to help me cope through a really rough time. And every time I eat that food, it activates that part of me. Whereas if I eat this other food, it may activate a different part of me. And once again, most people are unconscious that they have all these different parts of themselves that are existing inside of their system. And you can imagine that's going to be pretty hard to navigate your life, and pretty stressful in general to not know that you have different parts inside of you. You might think, some people that start to become a little bit more conscious might start thinking they're going crazy. They might start thinking something's wrong with me or something's bad with me. Why are there all these different parts? Why does it seem like everyone else around me is in tune with who they actually are and their true self? When, as I said, remember, the state of most human beings is being over-identified with one part in their system, where it's like to an extent where they're attached to it. So sometimes it may appear like everyone knows who they are, like people, oh, that's who they are, that's their true self, when in reality, it may very well not be their true self. That may be them being attached to a part within them that they think is them. And that's what I was saying. Most people are doing that with their protector parts. That's why there's so many people on the planet today that are always trying to survive and always in competition and always in that grind mode. It's like, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to do this, I got to be better, I got to climb the ladder, I got to prove myself, I got to get approval, I have to get the new thing to make sure that everything's good, you know? And there's just a big lack of just being present and being still and calm, you know, in that present moment. That's one of the big reasons. Now, it's not to say that there's not people that are in connection with their authentic self. There absolutely is, but it's definitely going to be a lot more rare that you come across someone that is in that state than it is for people to be over attached to certain parts within their psyches. Okay? So, with that being said, I want to speak a little bit more about the fragmentation. So with the more masculine protector parts, there's a lot less room for healing because it's so rigid and it's so, you know, remember, everything's like a threat. So it's like, what can I do to protect you? So there's going to be a lot of rigidity to that. There's going to be a lot of closing off to that, which, you know, makes it a lot harder to heal and a lot harder to learn certain things and to feel certain things. There's a lot less room for emotion other than maybe anger. Whereas the more vulnerable parts that we have in our system that are connected to, you know, those deeper wounds that we might have, and maybe those really younger parts of ourself that, you know, sort of remember that memory of the traumas that we went through, that part of ourself typically is the part that really needs a relationship to be built with it. Meaning we need to take our awareness within the central self and give space for this more vulnerable part of ourself. And with those vulnerable parts of ourself, remember I said it's directly connected to the feminine energy. There's a receptivity there. I mean, think about little kids, right? They're little creatures that are just in the present moment. They're not thinking about much really. They're not calculating things. They're just needing to be protected. They're needing to be nurtured. They're expressing themselves, not thinking about too much. They're feeling their emotions. They're just being. That's a feminine energy. They just came from the womb. So these parts of us are very similar in that sense. And sometimes, not sometimes, accessing that feminine energy that we all have the ability to access gets us more in tune with these younger, more inner child parts of ourselves. So what that means is that when we start building a relationship with these more vulnerable aspects of ourself, we are actually building a relationship with our younger child parts, with our vulnerable parts that at one point in time we had to suppress and we had to push away. So as we start rebuilding that relationship with that inner vulnerable child, the people will call it the inner child, we are now accessing degrees of being able to heal, being able to be receptive, being able to listen, to understand, being able to feel the emotions, being able to be in that present moment that previously we may have never had access to. All from building a relationship between the central self, the true self, and the inner, younger, vulnerable child. It starts to turn on those abilities for us to be more vulnerable in our present moment true self state, which is very healing. This starts to tune us into the reality of why we're even here in the first place as human beings living on this planet. This is when we start to really realize everything's based on unconditional love, and we're all here on an evolutionary journey, learning more about the self, learning more about the reasons as to why we're here. You know, what is our growth process? How do we better experience that? How do we create internal harmony and all these different things in that nature? Okay, so how do we build relationships with, you know, our more vulnerable parts, and how do we kind of show our protector parts, and we could say build relationships with our protector parts to let them know they don't need to run the show? Well, there's an entire process to that, and this is exactly what it is that I primarily will work on with clients that I work with that end up doing mentorships with me. So if any of you are interested in going much deeper with this, check out that second link below. That's where you can book the mentorships. Okay, and right now the mentorships are actually really popular. My entire schedule's booked right now. So if you book with me, just have some patience and I will simply reach out to you when I can fit you in. Okay? But with that being said, we have to learn how to implement things to create space for us to be safe enough to allow these parts to come through. Now, you know, for my personal journey, one of the most effective ways that I've been able to work with my parts and become more conscious of them and also create resolve between them is by allowing them in my actual system to completely come through. So basically what I will do is I will make sure that I have a safe space, a safe environment, and I will make sure, generally before I go through this, I will have, healthy coping mechanisms in my life. I will have pulled back from unhealthy ones. My foundation will be in place. And then I'll move into this where I give my body, like my true self, allows my parts to completely come through my system almost as a form of possession so that I can better understand what that part is, what that part wants, and how I can build a relationship with it so that I can continue healing in the way that it is that I'm needing to heal. So for my protector part, I will give it time and I will give it space to come through my system. I will literally give it permission to possess me, and I will live from that space, maybe for a day, maybe for 2 days, maybe for a week. And once it's kind of played its role in my nervous system, as I'm observing it as the central self while it's taking over, I'm actually learning about it. I'm understanding it more. I'm letting it know that I'm aware of it and I'm here and it's okay. As the central self, I can protect my entire system and I can be the mediator between my parts. And as I let my protector part know that by coming through my system, then it actually eases up more. It says, okay, well, if you got it under control and you're observing me and you know about me, then I guess I don't really need to be taking the reins. I don't need to be overriding your nervous system when you're unconscious to protect you. Okay? Same thing with my vulnerable child parts. I can give myself that space and I can give myself that permission to let that more vulnerable child feminine part to come into my system and act as a way to express itself and feel whatever it's needing to feel. Even and as these parts are coming through, this is changing my belief system. This is changing the way I see the world. This is changing the way I even see myself. This is changing my feeling states. It's biologically shifting things inside of my entire system, almost even on a neurological level. And it has the ability to also bring me back to memories that are connected to these parts at the same time. So if I let that inner child part completely possess my system, and I give it permission to, as I'm the central observer of the process, then I'm actually revisiting that time frame in my life when I actually suppressed this part of myself. And for me, this was generally around the age of when I was 14 years old and my parents ended up separating. And my whole life basically got flipped upside down. I felt like I was abandoned by my family. There was a bunch of drug use, substance abusing. My dad started treating me differently. I started hanging out with crowds of people that were not loving, that were very abusive, like a lot of narcissistic friends and things of that nature. So that was a very significant time frame in my life, and it was where I definitely suppressed my inner child during those times to survive some of this craziness and to survive all of this different whirlwind of trauma. So when I connect back with this inner child, it actually brings me back to that time when I was that age, and it brings me back to some of the memories and some of the feelings that it remembers feeling during that time frame. So for me, when I let that inner child come through, there's a lot of sadness and there's a lot of grief because it remembers when everything changed. So when I let that energy in, I start feeling that sadness and I'm letting that inner child inside of me know it's okay. I'm here. I'm with you now. I'm letting you come through. I'm not suppressing you anymore. I'm not keeping you locked away. I'm letting you have room and space to come through my body while I'm observing you and while I'm here to support you through the process. And I'm going to feel those emotions that were behind the fragmentation in the first place, which was extreme grief and extreme sadness. Okay, that is how you build a relationship with these different parts. Now, with my protector part, it's a little bit different. When that energy takes over, there's not much sadness, there's not much grief, it's more anger. So when that part comes through, I let that anger come through. I observe that part of myself. I'm allowing it to express in ways that it can and making sure, it's expressing in healthy ways to the best degree that I know how. But eventually, that energy can only go so far because it's so rigid and it's seeing everything as a threat. So I'm giving it that room to be there. I'm giving that room I'm giving room to it to come into my system, but I also get to a point where I let go of it. And I realize like, okay, this is too much. Like my system actually gets to a point where it's almost feeling burned out. And then that's when I know that that part is ready to step aside. And then I return completely back to the central space. But from that whole process, I am now more aware of what this part in me is doing and how it's protecting me. And that builds a relationship with that part. And as I build relationships with these different parts now get to become more aware of each other. Whereas sometimes these parts inside the psyche don't even know about each other, and that's where even more discord can be created. Because sometimes one of your parts wants to do this thing, and this is why it's doing this thing, and then this other part's like, no, we want to do this thing, and we're not going to do that thing that this other part wants to do. Whereas when you realize your own parts and you start to kind of mediate between the two, you can start helping them become aware of each other. Where it's like, okay, now my protector part knows what it was protecting. You were protecting my inner child. And now my inner child knows what my protector was doing and why it was being protected. So that maybe that younger part of me that was a little bit more able to feel my feelings, now that part is able to feel my feelings even more, because whereas previously my protector part was like, no, we don't feel at all. We don't know why necessarily we don't feel, but we know that this is keeping you safe. So we don't feel. Now that my protector knows that my inner child was an emotional being and wants to feel, and that's how I further connect with it, it can easily step back and allow me that space, because it's like, oh, wait, I'm protecting you. And you know what? You're in a process of healing now, so I don't need to step in and interrupt. I'll let Jeremiah, the central self, mediate the process. All right, so this is just an example. So with all that being said, I mean, clearly this is a lot of information. This is valuable stuff to allow yourself to soak in. This is life transformative information that I'm speaking about. So before we go into the next phase, if you're enjoying this video, if you feel like you're getting value from it, hit the thumbs up button. Do not forget to do that. Drop down in the comment section. Let me know how this is influencing you. Hit the notification bell. Get notified whenever I'm posting. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. That will further connect you to everything it is that I'm teaching. If you want to get more value from this, you have to subscribe. Okay? So let's go ahead and get into it. So what I'm going to do, and this is also largely because I am a psychic. I do 100% believe. I am not necessarily, I don't want to say it in a weird way, but I have had past life experiences from different densities of consciousness. Let's just put it that way. So as I'm here, incarnate on Earth as Jeremiah in this human body, I've had experiences in higher densities before, and I understand. I understand things that probably people don't understand, and it gives me an ability to have certain skills within my system in particularly that I can access that not everyone has the ability to access in the way that I'm able to. So based on my past life experiences, based on the occult initiatory work that I do, in this lifetime, and based on some of my life experiences as well, I have an ability to enter into states of possession pretty significantly and pretty easily that most people don't have. So don't watch what I'm doing and think, oh shit, I should be able to do that too. For a lot of people, it's not going to happen that way. But once again, because I'm an occultist, a professional occultist, because of all these different factors, I have that ability to do it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to display this on camera so that you can get a better understanding of what these parts look like specifically in myself. And the goal is to be able to reflect this back to you so that you can do some introspection within your own psyche and understand the parallels between my parts and potentially your parts as well. Let me just make sure the time is good. I have a call with a client coming up. Okay, so I'm going to make this quick. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift. I'm going to go from the central space, the true self me, which is what I'm in right now, and I'm going to allow myself to get completely possessed by my protector part, and I'm going to be expressing a little bit about what that part is feeling and what it's wanting and what it's just what its expression looks like. So here we go. Okay. Right now, I'm in more of my protector energy. And for me, this is an energy that is definitely much more competitive. Even when I'm in this energy, I almost feel like I look like a different creature almost. I feel like, literally, that may sound a little bit weird, but I feel like I'm a reptilian. Okay, everything is very um, controlled in this state. I feel like I'm in control right now. I feel like I have an ability to control things almost through a state of anger and a state of aggression. I can see like the belief system that I have in this energetic state is more hierarchical. I can see how everything is a hierarchy, and I can see how there's so many people on the planet that are uh, missing out on taking the steps that they need to take to improve their lives. In this state, I call them weak. These are weak humans. Um, I feel like power is the main thing that I want right now. I want power. I want to continue to increase my power. I want to dominate. I want to conquer. There's no one that can threaten me. There's no one that can beat me. I've never been beat in my entire life, truly. Um, I'm a very protective energy. Of I'm very conscious that I am here in this state that I'm in now, protecting this vulnerable part inside of Jeremiah. And nothing can hurt that part. Nothing can truly get to that part, especially because I protect it. And what I do inside of Jeremiah is I actually can operate through his subconscious mind so that when someone is coming against him, I can step through and help to protect him. So I also play a very important role in his life, and Jeremiah knows that. Okay? What else does this part want everyone else to know? What else do you want everyone to know? When I am here, I'm here for a reason, but if I'm here too long, then Jeremiah starts to burn out. Jeremiah gets to a point where he can't handle the intensity of what I bring to the table because he's a human, and this is too much energy to process all at once. So there is a time and a place for me, and the fact that Jeremiah gives me time to come through and understands me allows me to not have to take over as often as I once did when he was unconscious of me. Okay. All right. Thank you. So that was more of my protector part right there. Now I'm back to the central space. Okay, this is my true self. This is me, JeremiahJSchwartz. And what we were just talking with was a part inside of my psyche that was a protector part. Now, clearly, there was some interesting things that were said there, and I have a relationship with this part, so I know things about this energy that none of you know. But as you can see, there's almost like an extraterrestrial nature to this part for myself. And whenever I'm in that energy, it literally feels reptilian. Like I don't, it's a weird thing, but I actually feel like I'm a reptilian. And it's also interesting because I've had past life regressions where I've had memories of myself living a life where I was more of a reptilian species. And I feel like this part of me is connected to that past life in some sense. And it's a very protective part, as you can see. It sort of views a lot of things from the lens of growth, structure, as I said, hierarchies. And when I'm in that part for too long, it starts to get it's like it gets more rigid and more rigid and more rigid. It gets more powerful and powerful and powerful to the point where I'm almost viewing everything as a threat. Like every single interaction, every person is a potential challenger and a potential threat to me, and I have to like destroy them or have to conquer them. That's that energy that is connected to that part, and that part knows that. And once again, I'm aware of it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow myself to shift my consciousness again, my psyche, my state of being, and I'm going to allow this more vulnerable part of me that seems to be more connected to when I was like roughly the age of like 10 to 14, that I once shelled off from myself. I once repressed and said I'll never feel this part of myself again, or I'll never experience this part of myself again. So I'm going to let that part of myself really come through my system and completely take over to the best degree that I know how. Okay, so give me 1 second. All right. So this is this different younger energy that's inside of my system. And in this energy, I feel much more free. There's a sense of like not needing anything. There's a sense of like everything's working out. The universe is supporting me. I can see the nature of unconditional love from this state of being. On an internal level, I do feel like I'm back to like that 14, 10-year-old version of myself. It feels like the energy that's connected to this part of myself seems to be definitely connected to even a little bit before my parents separated. I feel like in this state, I'm experiencing the love from my mother. So my mom was always very supportive of me, and she always nurtured me and loved me the best that she knew how. And at this point in my life, she was always helping me and supporting me and making me food, making me feel like everything was under control, making me feel like everything was safe. And I can feel that energy of trust. I can feel that energy of not worrying. I can feel that energy of being more able to be in that present moment from this state right now. And because Jeremiah has done a lot of the processing with me and has allowed me to come through his system, we've been able to work on a lot of his sadness, and we've been able to work on a lot of the grief that I was holding from when my parents separated. So in this state, I don't feel too much of a heavy sense right now of this sadness and this grief. But when I first started allowing this part of myself to come through, I was feeling a lot of that emotion, and it was really needing to come through strong. But right now, it feels calm. I don't see things as being competitive. I don't see a need to argue with people. I don't want to have conflict really. I just want to connect. I want to have emotional experiences where I can feel things. I want to have that same type of unconditional love that I experience with my mom. I want relationships in my life that provide that sense of unconditional love. And these are the things that are most important to me right now. It's much more calm in this energy. Okay? All right. So now I am back to my central self. This is me. This is JeremiahJSchwartz in the central moment. Okay, so as you could see some pretty big differences between these two parts of myself. That one that I was just in was absolutely more of like a 14 to 10-year-old version of myself that still remembers that time frame of my life when my family was together, and like the love that I was getting from my mom and the way that I thought my family was. And there's still some of those emotions that part of me was holding from the sadness and the grief of when all that flipped upside down, and when all of that when my parents separated. But as I said, I have done a lot of processing with that part, so a lot of that grief and that sadness isn't really there anymore. It's not as significantly charged. It's not that it's not there, it's just it's not as charged. It doesn't come through as much anymore. So it was that part of myself that I just displayed that I actually had to suppress, and that I got rid of ever since my parents separated, when my mom left my dad, and when my dad like flipped on me and he basically started attacking me. So that part of me, I had lived from the age of 14 all the way up until 25 without experiencing that part. So that more protector part of me that you saw, that was what was running the show most of my life. It was that energy. Okay? And you can imagine how much of an internal discord that was creating for me, because as you could see, that vulnerable part of me that was more peaceful, more in the present moment, that was a large piece of my connection to the present moment, to my emotions, to my knowing that I'm living in an unconditionally loving universe, and that I'm nurtured just by being a human, just by being alive. So without that part of me being there and having a relationship with it, I was stuck more in this energy of I have to compete, I have to prove myself, I have to dominate my competition, I have to look for anyone who's out there to get me and threaten me. And of course, that comes with a bunch of different belief systems of like, these people are out there to get you, these are all these crazy conspiracies and all that stuff. Okay? So once again, where I'm at now, gotten more to a central space, and this is an ongoing learning process. It doesn't mean I'm always in my central space. There's times where these different parts get triggered, sometimes unconsciously, and I'm aware now, like I can sense into my body's sensations and my emotions when they're starting to come online. But sometimes there are certain situations that I go into in life, and they just come through, and I don't really have control over that. The only thing that I can do is give them space and observe them and let them know that I'm still here, and let them express what they need to express, and then eventually let them let them go, and then return back to that central state, and then be present with these different parts inside of my system to heal whatever it was that was truly underneath of the surface there. Okay, so with that being said, I have to wrap it up because I have a call coming up. If you enjoyed this video, definitely hit the thumbs up, do all those wonderful things, comment section, subscribe to the channel, etc. Watch this video multiple times. This is a powerful video. There are not many people on YouTube or on the internet in general that are able to do what I just displayed for you in this today's video, and there is so much to learn from this type of breakdown that I just gave and this example that I gave by actually doing this on camera. Okay, so definitely watch this multiple times, really soak in some of this stuff, and reflect it back to you. Figure out, try to tune into these different fragments and parts within your own system and realize none of them are bad, but realize probably there are many parts in you that need to be acknowledged, need to be accepted, and need to have space to sometimes come through and be felt in regards to some of the emotions that are behind some of these different parts. Okay, and if you want to take it to that next level, book a mentorship with me. I'm going to make it quick. Go down into the comment section. Excuse me, not comment section. Go down into the description. That's the first link. That's where you can join the Patreon. Tons of exclusive content on the Patreon. Deep occult knowledge, occult ritualistic practices, nervous system regulation practices, helping you to understand how to create a better foundation, tools to implement, to support this whole process. All of that is on the Patreon. Then as you get to tier number 3 and 4, this is an actual ritual that is performed on the full moon of every month. The deadline to sign up is the day before the full moon, and it's a very powerful ritual. Okay, if any of you want to take advantage of that, first link in that description. Second link is where you can book the mentorships or the one-on-one calls. And in that same second link, you have an option to book a tarot card reading with Alexia, where she can really pinpoint what it is that you're currently going through and where it is that you're headed, with connecting it back to Kabbalah at the same time. So check that out, all of that in the second link. Third link is the LUCIFERS Foundation course. This is an entire course that gives you everything you need to know in 11 modules that you'll have for the rest of your life to build a healthy, successful relationship with Lucifer. So definitely look into that if you're interested. Fourth link is the YouTube memberships. I would love to have you in the YouTube membership. It's always fun to see familiar faces and like-minded individuals in one location. So definitely check that out. Lots of benefits that come with it as well. Fifth link is the book recommendations that I have for you if you're wanting to study more on some of this occult initiatory stuff, understanding spirits, the initiatory system of Kabbalah and the Qlippoth. This is my book recommendation for you. It is a bundle with 4 ebooks in that one bundle for only $128. So if you end up making your purchase, all that I ask of you is that you recommend it to a friend as well. All right, with that being said, this is going to wrap it up. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you all have an amazing rest of the day or night, wherever you are, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.